What's up, podcast? This is Dr. Nick, and I am really excited for this interview. I always tell people the three books I recommend any chiropractor read when it comes to marketing their practice and creating a great experience for their patients is Jab, 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 Right Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, and Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman. And so I'm so excited to have him on as a guest. The reason why I wanted to do this quick, I already did an intro in the interview, but the reason I wanted to do this intro was because in the interview, we mentioned that we're going to be doing a webinar for chiropractors. And we recorded this as the COVID-19 stuff really started to become a problem. And I have kind of shifted some of my content, as you probably know, to helping chiropractors understand the PPP process. So that ended up pushing this interview to today. And so we ended up moving the webinar to May 5th at 7 p.m. Central. So that's May 5th. I think it's a Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central. So I'm going to do some voiceovers to make sure that we don't mention the April 20th in the interview itself. So you may hear where it kind of cuts out and I have to like talk over. So that will explain why. But to register for that webinar, just go to neverloseapatientagain.com, and that's going to be on May 5th at 7 p.m. Enjoy the rest of the interview. What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Nick with Leverage Media, and welcome to a very special episode of Path to a Million podcast. I am here with one of my, I would say, marketing heroes, but just like business heroes in general, Joey Coleman, author of Never Lose a Customer Again, one of the three books that I recommend any chiropractor get if they want to take their practice to the next level. So Joey, I thank you for being on the podcast. I'm excited to talk.
Oh, Nick, it is my pleasure. Thanks for that lovely introduction. And thanks to everybody who made the time to listen today. Really appreciate it. We're looking forward to a great conversation.
Absolutely. So the couple things that I want to talk, I explained to you the idea of the Path to a Million podcast, that there are three stages to get to a million and then a million after that. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the Never Lose a Customer Again, the first 100-day process, like the 8 stages specific to a chiropractic office. And then we're going to talk about, I just think that you have an interesting way of creating content for your podcast Experience This. And I really want to kind of dive into that and give some value to people that are out there that either A, are just creating content, or B, have a podcast, because I think yours is a little bit different than most that I listen to, and I really enjoy it. So,
well, thanks, Nick. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Give people a little, for people that don't know who you are, give them a little bit of a synopsis of that.
Sure. So I have spent the last 20 years teaching companies how to keep their customers. Right? So many organizations, whether you're a chiropractor, whether you're a restaurant, whether you're an auto mechanic, it really doesn't matter. So many organizations spend all day, every day thinking about how do we get new patients? How do we get new customers? And they spend very little time thinking about how do we keep them. Right? Now, this is very natural. There's no judgment when I say that. If we were to go on Amazon and we were to look at books, there's been about 1.2 million books written about sales and marketing. There's barely been 30,000 books written about customer service, customer experience, customer success, what happens after the sale, account management, patient management, all of those type of things. If we look at the human condition, most humans like to date more than be married, right? They like the chase more than the catch. This is biologically instilled in humans. And then we go to organizations where it is structurally reinforced. We have a marketing department. We have a sales department. These departments get a lot of money. They get a lot of attention. They get a lot of focus. And then we have the account management team, who's usually the lowest paid people in the organization that have very little say, who report up to marketing, who then reports to the CEO. So everything gets filtered through this, how are we getting more and more and more, instead of how are we keeping what we already have. So for the last 20 years, that's what I've done. I've looked at the science of retention. I've looked at the economics of retention, and I've combined these things to create a methodology and a process and really a philosophy for how chiropractors can think about getting and retaining their patients, as opposed to just having everybody on some type of trying to get as many people as possible to sign up for a program or a plan and to do their 12 adjustments or 20 adjustments or whatever it may be, and then hope that they renew and stay again. As opposed to staying for a while. And I should say, just for context, so everybody knows, my first visit to a chiropractor was when I was 15. My most recent visit to a chiropractor was yesterday afternoon. So I have been a long-time student, patient, if you will, of chiropractic care. I'm a big fan, so super excited to be on the show.
Awesome. And I think that this is an epidemic in chiropractic of this, and I'm sure it's this way in all businesses, but really in chiropractic, there is just this never-ending, unsatiable thirst for new patients, and there just is not as much conversation. So there's attraction, conversion, and retention in the chiropractic parlance. And for retention, that's how you build the $1 million practice. There are very few people that I know that have built a $1 million practice just on the sheer volume of new patients. Even if they got 100 new patients a month, which is a massive amount of new patients, the 1% of the 1% are getting that amount. If you're not keeping it, if your PVA is 6, 8, 10, 12, you're just never going to be able to grow. You're always just filling in the hole that is at the bottom of the bucket for a short amount of time. And this book right here is the answer to that problem when it comes to the patient experience. Like there's definitely like chiropractic coaching out there that people need to get to help with their retention numbers. And PVA is the number that we really track.
Yeah.
But this book, in terms of the actual experience of that first 100 days, it's so actionable. And so that's why I want to make sure that we dig into it.
Well, and if I may, Nick, what's fascinating to me about PVA is most chiropractors, not all, and not the folks that are listening to your show, I'm sure, but many chiropractors think of PVA as, if I can take it from a 4 to a 6 or from a 6 to an 8 or dial it up 1 or 2 more visits, think how much more money I'll make.
Right.
That's the mindset by which they come at this equation, as opposed to saying, why is it that a patient leaves after 6 visits?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that a patient doesn't work with us anymore? And invariably what they'll say is, oh, well, it must be price, or their schedules got too busy. No, the reason they left is you didn't give them a reason to stay.
Right.
I hate to be so blunt, but that is the reality.
Yep.
Every human being and I presume the majority of our listeners are in the United States, but for those who may not be in the United States that are listening, the majority of chiropractors, your patients have a certain amount of their budget that when they meet you, they have allocated for healthcare.
Right.
Now they're dividing that across their food, they're dividing it across their gym membership, across their insurance, all the various things. They kind of have a bucket of health, and they may not think of it down to a dollar amount, but they have a general gist. In my experience, most chiropractors are leaving a ton of money on the table that is currently going to other health-related activities that could be coming to the chiropractor, because the chiropractor is going to be more effective and more holistic in terms of the solution that it provides.
Yeah, that visit 6 to visit 8 is kind of like the magic number from what I've found. That's where people start to feel better. So if you've just been talking to them about their low back pain and how you're going to get rid of it, 6 to 8 visits is usually a good amount of time to get rid of that pain. If you're trying to talk to them about lifestyle and lifetime family wellness, that you can't all of a sudden only be talking about pain and now only be talking about life. You have to start that process. Day one when they're coming in is like, hey, listen, we're gonna get you feeling better, but the whole point of this is to get you functioning better. And if you don't have that conversation, you're gonna get real frustrated because you're gonna have a lot of people leaving at that 6, 7, 8 visit mark.
Absolutely. And if you don't have that conversation early, when you have it later, it feels really self-serving, right?
Exactly.
So when you've solved the low back pain and now you're saying, so now I want to put you on a maintenance program. First of all, no one wants to be maintained. No one in the history of humans wants to be maintained.
Right.
But a lot of chiropractors use that type of language. And a lot of patients automatically assume that type of language because their perspective then becomes, oh, this is about you continuing to make money from me forever.
Mm-hmm.
And their thought process is they compare chiropractors, because you both use the title doctor, to the medical doctors they know. Well, if they go to a medical doctor more than once a year for a checkup, they feel that, oh, wait a second, what is this doctor doing? They've got me in this loop. What's fascinating to me is we don't think of medical insurance that way and health insurance that way. We think of health insurance and medical insurance as protecting against the unforeseen thing in the future. I think there's a huge opportunity, and I want to be very clear for the listeners. I think this is a very nuanced conversation. I know most chiropractors run from the analogy of insurance in the same way they run from taking insurance from their patients, right? I get that. But when we think about how we position ourselves in the marketplace and to our patients, we need to come up with analogies that are relevant to them. And there might be an opportunity to say, think of this as the insurance that you're happy you have. Think of this as the insurance that you enjoy paying for. Because by continuing to come to us, not only do you avoid that back pain, but you avoid the things that are naturally going to happen, that if we talk about what's going on with your parents' health, with your grandparents' health, you can avoid a lot of those things by making an investment of once a week or once every other week getting an adjustment here, instead of waiting till you're 70 and on 5 prescriptions a day, and each one is creating side effects that cause you to have to take other prescriptions to counter the side effects of what you're having, and you're feeling miserable and you're quote unquote in your golden years, and they feel like the worst years of your life because your body is having all these challenges. We can help you avoid that. That's a very different positioning.
Yeah, I love that positioning. And I do think that if more did that, we'd be seeing a whole lot higher percentage of the population. So we talked about the structure of the podcast, and I want to spend most of our time on your 100-day process and the 8 phases. But when we were talking before this, you kind of gave an interesting insight into the difference between customer experience at those different stages. So let's start off at that 0 to 250 mark. So people are just starting out in practice, they're starting to ramp up, they're starting to learn things. What should they be thinking about, or what do you see in those startup culture type practices?
Yeah, so usually in those type of practices, I see one of 2 types of behaviors, or maybe kind of a blend of the 2, right? But usually it falls into 1 of 2 buckets. Bucket number 1 is the person who's so excited to be out in practice. They're done with school. They're finally able to lay hands on people and do the work they feel like they were called to do, and they care so much. They are so focused on every patient, and they only have a handful of patients, so they know everything about that patient. The patient walked in, they immediately know their name, they immediately remember their last adjustment, they know their spouse's name, their kids' names, they know all these pieces because they're only retaining that information for a small number of people. So often you deliver the best customer experience in your business when you're going from 0 patients to maybe 30 patients. Right? Because there's just a handful. You really care about them. So that's one bucket. The other bucket is the folks who are loving the chiropractic, but they are so overwhelmed by the concept of running a business that they actually are sacrificing the patient experience a little bit because they're waist deep in the billing systems and getting a receptionist and what do we do for the phone lines and do we do online scheduling and all the minutia of running a business, which absolutely interact with the patient, but they get so caught up in that they kind of run out to the table, make the adjustment, and go back to their office and their computer and actually continue to build the practice. Right, in terms of the systems and the operation.
That's where I was at.
Yeah, fair enough. And Nick, I love the honesty, right? Because here's the thing. Neither of these are bad. This is the human condition. Throughout our entire conversation today, listeners, there is 0 judgment in my voice for this stuff. If I have something that I'm going to be judgy about, I'll let you know. Don't worry, because there's certainly a couple things. But in this scenario, this is just how folks work. We then move to the 250 to 500. What happens at this scale is the people who are very caught up in the business actually get caught up even more in the business, but they have to start paying attention to the customers because the customers are starting to leave, or the patients are starting to leave out the back door as fast as they bring them in the front door. So often in that 250 to 500 range, they start to say, wow, I should pay attention to this. Compare that to the person who did pay attention in the patient experience in the beginning. They're now paying less attention to it. And the reason they're paying less attention to it is there's more patients. Right. And so they're in a situation where they may open a file. And I know some chiropractors, and I say this respectfully, who actually take a photo of the patient on the first day to put in the file so that when they meet the patient, they remember that they've seen them before. Because if they're only looking at the notes, they're like, have I ever even adjusted this? I'm remembering nothing about this person, right? So they actually include a photo. This is where folks that are forward thinking start to realize we need to put in place some systems to record the information that will help refresh my memory before an adjustment. So the top chiropractors are the ones who are saying, you know, in taking their patient notes after an adjustment, they're not only writing down, hey, I did this on, you know, L2 or, you know, whatever it may be, but they're also saying, and did I get that number right? I think there's an L2.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
I hope there's an L2. Okay, good. But that they're also saying, Joey has a big vacation planned to Hawaii, or Joey's son has a birthday coming up, so that the next time I come in, they can say, hey, how was that vacation, or how was that birthday? Those little things, folks, and I don't mean to take anything away from the miracles that you work on the table, those little touches are more important than the physical touches that you're doing for whether a patient will stay. Gotcha. Patients stay when they feel that the chiropractor cares about them as a person, not just as a patient. That is the secret, right? When I, as a patient, shift from believing that you care about me as a patient to believing that you care about me as a person, and that's not going to happen on the first visit. Let's just be abundantly clear. It's not going to happen on the first visit, but it can happen by visit 5, by visit 6, right? When we get to that magic PVA point, that's where if I don't believe it by then, I'm not coming back for more.
Yeah. And especially if you have an intentional system in place to generate that feeling in people. And if you know where those choke points are, that it's like you have systems in place that to go into effect before they get to those critical visits. So I love that. That was so when I was at 250, that's when I realized that I couldn't do both the practitioner and the business owner part of it. And so that's when I hired my second associate and I stopped seeing patients altogether. And that was the point where it really started to take off, and we tripled the practice in 4 years with me not seeing any patients, because I was able to focus on the things that I love. They were able to focus on the things that they love, and they could give that service to people, because we ran a survey with patients, just asking for like feedback right around this time, like when I had just hired the second doctor. And it didn't happen a lot, but like we got very little negative feedback. But the negative feedback that came back on me was, you know, I like Dr. Nick, but he always seems like his mind is somewhere else when he's adjusting. And that's a real bad feeling to have about your doctor.
That is, it's a tough feeling, but here, I'll give you credit, Nick, number one, that you would share that so publicly and honestly. Like, kudos to you, because we don't get better as business owners. We don't get better as chiropractors if we're not willing to admit, like, hey, here's an area where I had a shortcoming. Here's an area where it didn't work, right? But number two, when you hear that, what are you going to do about it? See, most doctors would hear that and say, well, that's not true. That's why I became a chiropractor, because I care about people. And they dismiss it instead of getting inquisitive. See, I'm a big believer that when you get feedback from your patients, your job is to hear that without judgment and then get inquisitive as to what is the story under the story. So the story under the story, it may have been that you were busy that particular day, and they're absolutely right. You didn't give the care, and it comes as a feedback. You're like, oh, okay, I need to be more focused. Or it may be indicative of a bigger problem. And it sounds like you realized early on that you liked the running the practice more than the being the chiropractor piece, which is great. Congratulations for realizing that early in your career, instead of being somebody who had been a chiropractor for 30 years, hated dealing with patients, and just wanted to run the systems of the business. Because we've been to those chiropractors. We know those chiropractors. They exist. They exist in every profession. You know, it's interesting you mentioned how you grew. What's fascinating is when we get to that 500,000 to $1 million range, everything starts to get bigger. So there's a saying that money doesn't make people good or bad. It just exacerbates what was already there, or highlights what was already there. The same holds true at the 500K to $1 million point. The things that were broken hurt worse. The things that were working work better. Okay. But you have to be willing to stop and pay attention to it. You also start at that point to get to a scale where if you don't have systems and processes, everything starts to fall apart. And where most chiropractors get caught in a loop in that 500K to $1 million range is they get in there and they get stuck in that space, because it becomes about getting enough patients to fill the funnel of the patients that are running out the back door. The ones that break through to $1 million and $1 million plus are the ones that a significant percentage of their patients continue to come see them every month. That's the difference. You can't be in a state of just get new ones and get above $1 million. I don't believe, because you run out of patients. Even if you're in the biggest city in the world, you run out of people who are willing to consider or try chiropractic. They're gone. And so it's got to be about sustaining at that point, not about just acquisition.
Yeah. And this is what I talk to my team about a lot in my practice, is that, we live in a town of 110,000 people. We've got probably 10,000 files-ish. Like, there's only so many people at some point. Like, if we're around for 30 or 40 years, we run out of people.
They're gone.
Because if they don't have a good experience, this is what I tell my team. If they don't have a good experience, like if they don't sign up on day 2, it's usually because we didn't influence them enough to think that it was worth the investment of their time or their money. And if they make that decision, no, I don't want to do that, it's not like they're going to come back in a couple of months and give us another shot.
Right.
Like, those people are gone. The ones that leave because they didn't like the experience, usually once they become a patient, they love the experience in our office. But if they have some negative experience, they're not coming back. So it's we have to make sure that all the experiences are solid for everyone. And you're absolutely right that there are so many people that get stuck at that 500 to $1 million stage, because that's when they really get focused on trying to throw money at the problem of acquiring new patients. And you and I both know Tony Ebel.
Yes.
With 𝗵𝘂𝗃. And, I've been in his practice, and that's an experience. That's and I went in there after you had worked with him. And, he's giving out T-shirts and giving out coffee mugs and tumblers. And it's just it's just a whole different vibe than 99% of the practices I've been into. And it feels like a family, the people there are just excited to be there.
Absolutely. And when you focus on creating an experience that goes beyond the table, number one, it gets more interesting. Mm-hmm. Number two, that's often the thing that your patients are going to talk about. Here's the fascinating thing about health. We as Americans, especially, you see this in the United States, Americans have this weird relationship with their health. We kind of only want to talk about our ailments. We don't really want to talk about our successes. So, I've got a bad knee, but we don't want to talk about, I used to have a bad knee, but it's totally better now because I get an adjustment every week, right? We don't, it's just the way we are. I was in a conversation, and I want to be clear before anybody gets nervous. I'm going to avoid any HIPAA issues here, okay? I was in a conversation with one of my neighbors yesterday. She's in her 80s, and she has a bad back, and her doctor's encouraging her to get surgery. And she mentioned this in passing, and I was like, have you considered chiropractic? And the main reason I was just is because I was my personal belief is that surgery should be the last thing you consider, not the first thing you consider. I'm not against surgery. Sometimes surgery is the solution. I just don't, I think in the same way that, when you're a hammer, you think everything's a nail. I think when you're a surgeon, you think everything's an opportunity to cut. When you're a chiropractor, you think everything's an opportunity, everything's a subluxation, everything's an opportunity to adjust, which it may be. But we may want to consider other opportunities as well. And I asked her, have you ever considered chiropractic? And she said, I went years ago and I didn't like it. And I said, how many years ago did you go? She was like, I think it was 25 years ago. I said, wow. How many adjustments did you have? And she said, well, just one. I didn't like it. And I thought to myself, here's somebody who for over 2 decades has had a negative experience of chiropractic care based on their first adjustment, who probably in that 25 years could have saved themselves a lot of literal pain by at least considering this option. So the other challenge you all have, and I empathize with you listeners, is your patients come to the table with their own baggage about the care you provide. And in my personal experience, I have seen a lot of baggage around chiropractic. when it comes to patients. Oh, I'm afraid you're going to break my neck and I'll be paralyzed. Oh my God, are you a real doctor or do you play one on TV? And all this stuff, which is completely unfair, and welcome to reality. And I say welcome to reality because I used to be a criminal defense lawyer. And the fact that I just shared that made some of you people listening not like me. Just because I shared that I used to be a criminal defense lawyer.
Right.
Here's the crazy thing. We're responsible for the baggage associated with our relationships with our patients. And we either get to meet them where they're at or we get to get angry that they have baggage.
Yeah.
I think we can just meet them where they're at and work through it.
I 100% agree. So I think that that's a really good segue in, we've mentioned the 100 days, we've mentioned the experience. And so for those of you that have read the book as like a super fan of the book, I want to really get like your insight on each one of the 8 stages for a chiropractor specifically. And for somebody who has not read the book, hopefully we'll be able to show them like how much value is in there, because we've probably got about 15 minutes to go through those 8 stages. But this is a 300-page book or whatever it is, and I mean there is so much good value in here. So you have to make sure that you pick that up. Now we are going to be doing a webinar together. So hey guys, in the intro, I was mentioning that we had originally scheduled the webinar for April 20th. So what you're about to hear talks a lot about April 20th, but the actual date for the webinar is going to be May 5th. 7 p.m. Central, and you'll go to neverloseapatientagain.com. That'll give you all the information. But remember, it's May 5th at 7 p.m., not April 20th, what you're about to hear. All right, back to the podcast. But on the 20th, I really want to do a deeper dive into this for chiropractors so that they can really get some actionable pieces out of that. This is probably not exactly the best format for doing a deep dive into it.
Sure.
You want to go through it. So just to give some context, so talk to me about the 100 days, and then there's 8 stages, and I believe there's 6 different ways that you can communicate at each one of the stages. So you probably do a better job of explaining it than I do.
Yeah, no, you're on it, Nick. You've got it. So let me give a quick overview of the first 100 days concept generally, and then we'll go through the 8 phases in lightning round. And folks, definitely come back for the webinar because we'll be able to dive a lot deeper and apply it. But the goal here in the podcast is to give you at least a taste of what could be available if you wanted to come back and join us for the webinar when we'll spend a whole hour just on this. So first of all, the first 100 days. All the research shows that your patients are deciding how long they want to be in relationship with you during the first 100 days of the relationship. The lifetime value of the patient can be determined based on how they feel on day 101. In the typical practice, somewhere between 20 and 80% of new patients are leaving the practice before the 100-day anniversary. In the typical practice, if on day 101, they feel great about their relationship with their chiropractor, the typical patient will stay for 5 years. Now, I don't know about you. That takes the PVA out the roof when we start talking about a 5-year patient, all right? So the way we do this is we pay attention to the various phases in the patient journey. I believe there are 8 phases to the patient journey. Most chiropractors are paying attention to maybe 2 of them, maybe 3. If we pay attention to all 8, our business skyrockets. And that's how you get to the million and above, right? And that's how you get to continue to maintain and grow your practice. So without further ado, here are the 8 phases. They all start with the letter A, because if you get them all right, it's like your patients are giving you a report card of straight A's. All right, phase 1. Assess. This is where a prospective patient is deciding whether or not they want to do business with you, whether they want to become a patient. They're looking at your website, they're looking at your marketing materials, your ads, they're talking to other people who have been patients of yours. In common parlance, we call this the marketing and sales portion of the journey. We then come to phase 2, the admit phase, or day 1. Yeah.
Real quick, just because I may jump in on a couple of these.
Yeah, please.
With the assess phase, with Leverage Media, we are a content marketing agency. And the reason why we're a content marketing agency and not just like we run a Facebook ad for you is because in this phase, in the assess phase, this is where people are going online and they are doing their research. So even if they see an ad for you on Google or they see an ad for you on Facebook or their friend tells them about it at work, they still want to get a feel for who you are. And if you've been creating content for some amount of time, they now have videos they can watch of you. They can see that you're a normal person. They can see that you're not a crazy chiropractor, right? They can look at your website. They can get a good feel for you. And this is why content is so important, because there are so many people in the assess phase that never call you because they can't find anything about you, but they can find stuff about your competition, and they end up choosing them instead, and you just don't know it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. You're not even aware that you missed the opportunity. Exactly. Nick, I 100% agree with you. Going back to that story of my 80-year-old neighbor. So I had talked to her husband before, and I went and I got a brochure, a physical brochure. Yes, folks, they still exist in some worlds, because I knew my audience, right? I wasn't going to say, hey, go to his Twitter feed and follow. I was like, all right, here you go.
I got this webinar.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I go, and here's the funny thing. I hand her the physical brochure from my chiropractor. She opens it up, and as she's opening it up, she says, now, what does he look like? Literally, that was the first thing she said. Nick, it was eye-opening to me. I was like, holy cow, here we are, 80 years into this woman's life. She's considering her medical care for her back that has bothered her for at least 60 of those 80 years, and she wants to know what this doctor looks like. I love it. It's brilliant. Humans are humans. That's why this stuff works. Humans are humans. So in the assess phase, you want to preview to the prospective patient the experience of being a patient. So when you think about your content marketing, you want your spirit to come through. You want your energy or your style to come through. Now, here's the great thing. Most chiropractors think, oh, I need to match a certain style of the person that I'm emulating. I need Gary Vaynerchuk style, but I don't swear as much. Or I need to be like, you know, Tony Robbins, but I'm not as big. What do I do, right? We have these visions of what this marketing and motivation and getting your message and your word out there looks like, when the reality is the best thing you can do is capture you, capture your essence, capture the unique things about you, and get that out. All right. So that's highly what I recommend we do in the assess phase.
Absolutely.
All right. We then come to phase two. No, please jump in anywhere you want. We then come to phase two, because you can tell I have no strong opinions about this, folks, right? You know, I get pretty ramped up and excited. Phase two is the admit phase. This is day one of the first 100 days journey, okay? In the admit phase, the prospect acknowledges that they have a problem or a need that they believe you can help them with, okay? In the chiropractic setting, this is when they schedule their first appointment, okay? They admit that they're gonna give this a try, and they're gonna come see you. They transition, they officially become a patient. Phase three, the affirm phase. This is where the patient starts to feel buyer's remorse for the decision they just made. Now, folks, by the way, in the various stages, I mentioned that, you know, most chiropractors are good. Most chiropractors are pretty decent at the assess phase. Most chiropractors are pretty good at scheduling a first appointment, like they answer the phone and they find time on the calendar. Here's the first phase where most chiropractors completely fall apart. The assess phase, or the affirm phase, excuse me. This is where the patient starts to feel that buyer's remorse. Now, here's the interesting thing. We've all heard of buyer's remorse, okay? Anybody who's been to business school, listened to a business podcast, read a business book, you're probably familiar with the concept of buyer's remorse. The reality is most businesses don't have a system and a process designed to address the buyer's remorse that their patients are feeling. Your patient, after they scheduled their first appointment with you, usually that first appointment isn't 5 minutes later. It's usually several days or maybe a week, you know, depending on how you've set up your practice. Some of you are over indexing on, we always have space for new patients to the detriment of existing patients. Hopefully, after you've actually read my book, you'll make the new patients wait instead of making the existing patients wait, which means the affirm stage will actually get longer. What you need to do in the affirm stage is address the buyer's remorse that they're actually feeling. Remind them that they've made a decision to take care of their body, to take care of themselves, and that you're excited to help them do that. We then come to phase four, the activate stage. Okay, this is the first real moment of truth. They come for their first visit. We want that first visit to leave them feeling that this experience is unlike any other experience they've ever had. Now, let's be clear. They're comparing you to doctors in a traditional medical setting. Okay, a GP. That's what they're going to compare you to. So they're going to be wondering, well, what does the waiting room look like? Are the magazines recent or old? How long do I have to wait? Is this going to happen on time, or am I going to sit here for 30 minutes? You know, what is available? So when you think about designing your practice, the onboarding of a new patient. What's it like as they move through your lobby? What's it like as they come back to where your adjustment bays are? What are these various things that are happening? Are the feed, if you will, the experience feeds and the emotional feeds that are determining whether or not they like the activate stage. We then come to phase 5, the acclimate phase. Here's again where most chiropractors fall off the rails. See, in the acclimate stage, the patient is getting used to your way of doing business. Most patients, when they come for their first adjustment, don't have a vision of what ongoing chiropractic care looks like because they've never experienced it before. Or if they have experienced, they've experienced it with another chiropractor who, guess what, they're not going to anymore. So the experience wasn't that great. We need to remind our patients what comes next. We need to remind our patients where they are in the process, okay? Now, many chiropractors sell packages, and you probably call them something different than a package, but the patient thinks of it as a package, and they think, oh, I've got 12 visits. Guess what? They lose track of where they are in the number of visits. They lose track of what's happening to their body. I think there's an opportunity for chiropractors to remind them each step of the way what's coming next and of the progress they're making, which brings us to phase 6, the accomplish phase. This is when the patient accomplishes the goal that they had when they originally decided to do business with you. Now, here's the crazy thing, chiropractors. You think, and rightfully so because the patient told you, that the goal they're trying to accomplish is their back feeling better. That's not true. That's their micro goal. Their bigger goal is that they never have back problems again. But they don't want to tell you that because if they tell you that, first of all, they've lost all hope. They don't even believe that's possible. Second of all, they believe that if they tell you that, what that means is you're going to say, great, come 3 times a week for the rest of your life and keep paying me money and we'll make it go away forever, right? Too many chiropractors sell you'll never have an issue again too early in the process. Deal with the acute problem, but as you're messaging it, be reminding them that this is a lifestyle choice. This is not something that is, how do we deal with the problem and then it goes away and then we never have to think about it again, right? What are the analogies we can use? I mean, I sometimes like to think of chiropractic as a haircut. Stick with me, folks, because some of you just went, oh my God, this guy's weird. Okay, stick with me. Here's the deal. I know that I need a haircut every 4 to 6 weeks, okay? Because I'm a guy, I often push it to 6 to 8 weeks, okay? It becomes noticeable. It becomes ridiculous. For those of you watching the video, you're seeing about week 7, okay? This is the way. I get full Paul McCartney Beatles style at this point, okay? The hair is a little out of control. I think there's an opportunity to position your care in the same way, that it's not that we can go without an adjustment for 8 weeks and then come in for 1 and we're good for another 8 weeks, but rather that your body continues to move throughout your life. Your body continues to grow and or shrink and expand and contract throughout your life. And as such, we need to constantly be working to make sure that the bones, the structural element that is carrying this meat around, is in alignment and is working well. So if we change it from, hey, I'm a doctor, come to me when you're in pain, I'll give you a pill and it'll go away, to, hey, I'm in this for the long haul with you, not from an economic point of view, but from an evolutionary point of view. Your body is constantly changing. We need there to keep it in alignment because all day, every day, you're doing things in your natural going about your life that are putting you out of alignment. You're flying on airplanes. You're riding in cars. You're playing on the ground with your kids. You're bending over a weird way to pick up something heavy that you shouldn't be picking up by yourself in the first place, and you decided to lean over a table and one-arm it and pull it back over the table. You're doing all of these crazy things. So there's an opportunity to be educating people and reminding them of this early on in the process. The goal when we get to phase 6 is to celebrate what they've actually accomplished. Okay, to remind them what their goals were in the beginning and celebrate them when they actually achieve those goals. When we do kind of, I know some chiropractors would refer to it as like a review of findings. Maybe when we do x-rays the second time, when we come back and we do a compare and contrast, here's where you were, here's where you are now, here's how things are going. There's a huge opportunity in that conversation to celebrate the progress. Instead of just saying, look, you've progressed, which is all about, see, I did my job. Right. And instead saying, do you remember when you came in and you wrote on your intake form that when you wake up in the morning, it's a 9 out of 10 on the pain scale? What was it this morning? Actually, it was a 6 out of 10. Do you realize what a huge success that is? No, because we've been doing this over the course of 2 months. It's been slowly getting better. This has become your new norm. Let's not go back to the 9.
Right.
How do we avoid doing that, right? We then come to phase 7, the adopt phase, where the patient becomes loyal to you and only you. They're not going to go to any other chiropractor. They're committed. They are 100% bought in. And last but not least, phase 8, the advocate phase, where the patient becomes a raving fan, referring their friends and family to you. Here's the problem that most chiropractors have at the advocate phase. 2 problems. Number 1, they never ask for referrals. Or if they do ask for referrals, they ask way too early. They ask after the 2nd or 3rd visit. I am not giving you a referral until you've proven to me that you can do the job. Don't ask for referrals until after the accomplish phase, and your referral strategy will get exponentially more successful.
Absolutely. This is the kind of genius that I love. So again, it's all in here. Like, I would recommend, if you have not read this book, to listen to that back over before you read it, because that's chiropractic specific. This has a lot of different examples of different types of industries. But what's cool about this is that each chapter is one of those 8 phases. And at the end of it, it asks you some questions, and then it has the 6 different ways that you can communicate. So in person, email, phone call, mail, gifts, and what's the 6th one?
Videos.
Video. Got it. I almost got it.
That was impressive. You rattled off 5 out of 6 right off the... Nick clearly has done his homework, folks. No, that's perfect. So there's these 6 tools.
I've basically read this book 5 times,
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I should know it by now.
I love it. Well, yeah, so there's 6 tools that we can use to communicate with our customers. Nick just shared them. What I find is that most chiropractors are using 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And there's a huge opportunity when you use all 6. And the opportunity is different humans respond to different types of communication. And if your presumption is that they're going to respond to the type that you respond best to, you haven't really been listening to our whole conversation, right? The fact of the matter is every human is different. There's some of your patients that would rather talk to you on the phone than read an email. There's some of your patients that will happily watch video after video of you reminding them of what stretches and things they should be doing. And they would watch those more if you sent those videos to them via a text message instead of saying, well, go to this website, which they'll never go to, or here's the printout of the stretch, which they'll read in front of you and then lose and never do the stretches at home. And then you get irritated that they're not following your advice. And it's like, they're not following your advice because they're human. It's not because you're bad. It's not because they're bad. It's because they're busy. We live in an era where we should be thankful that they even came into the office for an adjustment. Do you realize how many things they had to move around on their schedule to make that possible, right? Instead of saying, oh my gosh, why aren't they doing the care in between? Oh, this would be so much more successful. I get it. They probably get it too. But you got to give them a reason to want to do it.
Yeah. So at the end of each of the chapters, it forces you to think about because you don't have to use all 6 in each one of the 8 stages. You'll pick one or 2.
And in fact, you shouldn't. Let me be very clear. You shouldn't. You will overwhelm them. It's way too much communication. Slow your roll. Less is more. That was the biggest take. So when we met, you were kind enough to look at my Never Lose a Customer Again process for the agency. And you were like, you're just overwhelming them. It's just too much. Because for me, I'm always like, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it at the nth degree. Right? I want to be the best Never Lose a Customer Again process ever, right? And you're like, you need to cut this out. You need to cut that out because you're already asking them to do this stuff for their own practice. Now you're asking them to read books and do this and do that. Right. And I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. So simplification is for sure, but it's like you pick 1 or 2 at each one of the 8 stages and you find the one that makes the most sense. But over the 8 stages, you want to use all 6 because you never know how they're gonna interact. 100%, Nick. Exactly. You should use all 6 of those tools at least once across the patient journey. It just then becomes fun to figure out, well, where should we use it? Where's it going to be most valuable? Am I going to give you a gift on your first visit? Probably not. You shouldn't. I've gone to a chiropractor's office where you walk in on the first visit and they're like, hey, here's our t-shirt and our mug and our cup. And I'm like, I'm not being a walking billboard for you until I know whether you do a good job. Right. Give that to me later when I love you, when I'll happily promote your brand. That's fine. Right? So thinking about timing, a lot of this stuff is like dating. And I use some of these analogies in the book. Here's the deal. You go on the first date. The last thing you want to do is when you sit down on a first date, before you've ordered appetizers, say, so when should I meet your parents? It's too much. Stop rushing. Right. Slow down. Right. I'm not even sure I'm staying till dessert. Okay. Right. Let's just take it easy. We need to do the same thing as business owners. The problem is we get so excited about delivering value. And here's one of the things I'll say, sweeping generalization about chiropractors, the chiropractors I've met. You have hearts of gold. You're in it for the right reason. You want to help people live pain-free, happy, healthy lives. But sometimes your desire to do that is just a little too much. It's a little too overwhelming, right? Because your patients don't even care about their own health as much as you care about it. You got to ease them into it. You're not going to get them to cut out the sugar and the soda and the fast food and all this stuff on the first visit. Stop saying, hey, let's get a kale smoothie into you on the first visit, okay? Slow your roll. Maybe just say, hey, instead of McDonald's 5 times a week, what if we went to 3 times a week? Okay? Now, I get that some of you to say that would drive you insane. But do you want results or do you want to be right? Yeah. I don't know about you. The majority of chiropractors I've met actually want the result more than they want to be right. But they've gotten so caught up in the methodology and the way to deliver it and their blueprint and their philosophy of the world that they've stopped to recognize that the majority of their patients are not living in that healthy world right now. They have to be brought there slowly.
Yeah. You said gifting, and I know that you know John Ruhlin with Giftology.
Oh, yeah.
And that's another book that is just, it's not one of my top 3 that I recommend, but it's definitely in the top 10. And if you are going to be implementing any kind of gifting strategy, you definitely should check that out, because it really shouldn't be about you. It should be about them and, something that they want to hold on to. And so, yeah,
100%.
So remember, the webinar where we do a dive into this process is going to be May 5th, 7 p.m. Central. And you're going to go to neverloseapatientagain.com to register. And remember, May 5th, 7 p.m. The last thing I want to talk to you before I let you leave, we're starting to run out of time, is your podcast, Experience This, I think is different than a lot of podcasts I listen to, especially a lot of business podcasts. A lot of podcasts are similar to this, where it's just like you bring somebody on, you interview them, and then that's, basically the gist of it. With yours, it definitely feels like, it's definitely more of like a production. You know what I mean? Like it's more intentional. You feel like you are, you're like, I almost feel like I'm listening to like the NPR stuff where they do.
Oh, I'm very flattered. That's nice. Yeah, that was actually part of the intention.
And like storytelling, and it was great. So the thing I wanted to bring this up is, I recommend the podcast highly, especially if you're interested in building a better patient experience, because they give so many great examples. But the thing I thought was interesting that I thought chiropractors could get value from if they are creating more content, is the idea that you can be like part of what you do, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about the structure, but the episodes that I've listened to, you'll take an article that you guys find about customer experience, which I'm sure you just have like some kind of Google alert. You take that, you pick one that you like, and then you and your co-host discuss it. And it's like, what chiropractor couldn't find some article on some health-related topic and give their 2 cents on it? And so I just wanted to get your kind of thought process on content creation in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks who maybe haven't listened to the show, let me give you a little context. It's called Experience This. And the idea is to give you bite-sized examples of customer delight. So it's a 30-minute show, and we do 3 10-minute segments. And in each segment, we talk about some type of customer experience. And our show is all about positive customer experience. So as a general rule, we don't talk about the negative experiences because there's enough people talking about negative experiences. So we talk about a positive customer experience. We have different categories for the segments. So when you come into a show, there's going to be 3 segments, but you don't know what segment types they're going to be. The one Nick just mentioned is called CX Press, Customer Experience Press. And it's something that we've seen in the press, a story that we then talk about. So we'll take the article, we'll give a little highlight of the article, and then my co-host, Dan Gingiss, and I will banter back and forth on whether we agree with the article, we don't disagree, or we disagree, how we could apply it in different settings, et cetera, et cetera. We made the decision early on with our podcast that we weren't going to have any guests. We weren't going to do interviews. Now, that's not because we don't think there are plenty of people that have great ideas out there, but pretty much every podcast out there is an interview show in some capacity. There's nothing wrong with that, but we were like, what would it be like if we did something different? Additionally, most podcasts are 30 to 60 minutes on the same topic with the same person. We thought, what would it be like if we just had a 10-minute snippet that you could listen to on a short commute? Or if you had a longer commute, you can listen to the whole episode. Or if you were going to do one set of reps working out, you could listen to a whole thing in one set of reps and then move on to the next. So we decided to make smaller bites. I think the takeaway, if I may, for chiropractors is when you're creating your content, what's more important than how am I going to fill the space is what are the things I'm not going to do? Right? So we decided we're not going to interview people. We decided we're not going to go longer than 30 minutes. We decided we're going to average 10 minutes per segment, but we're going to be okay if one goes 6 and we're going to be okay if one goes 14. But we're not going to be okay with one going 25. Right? And so by putting some constraints on your content, it actually makes it easier. I don't know about you, but when I've looked at like email newsletters and blog posts and social media updates, sometimes you sit down and you look at that blank cursor just blinking at you saying, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything meaningful? And we get caught in this loop of like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Where instead, if you're with another chiropractor and that chiropractor says, hey, I saw this new study that said adjusting, in this way can stop people from being addicted to nicotine.
Right.
Okay, now we could talk about that single sentence for an hour if we wanted to,
sure.
Right? And we don't have to get caught up in this. The other cool thing about talking about other people's articles or research is then you get to tell them that you talked about them. And what do you think they do? They share that on social media. They say, hey, my article got talked about on this customer experience podcast. Go listen to it. And we get more listeners from their fans. So it was very strategic. When we talk about a brand, we tag them when we post the show. We don't tell them in advance. We don't say, hey, Amazon, we're going to talk about your new stores, right? But what we do is then when we talk about the store and we tag them, they retweet us. They explain it. And that has led to sponsorships for us. That has led to new articles, new stories. So I believe that there's content walking around you all day, every day. If I may make a recommendation for what I think is one of the best tools for content creation, there's a fabulous book by my good friend Marcus Sheridan called They Ask, You Answer. This book is incredible. It details a very simple principle, but it breaks it down in a beautiful way, that if your patients ask a question, you should write that down. You should then answer that question in online content, whether it's a video, a blog post, something like that. They ask, you answer, completely changes, not to mention the benefits that it will have from like an SEO point of view and what it does to your website and search. Oh my goodness. Be making content, but do me a favor, listeners, make quality content. Don't make the same content everybody else is making. Part of the reason that we do our show the way we do it is we talk about things that just happened and we dissect those experiences because we don't want to talk about the same experience that everybody's talked about 50 other times.
Right. Yeah, I think that I just did a video on Monday about newsjacking. We were talking, I made it about how you can, utilize the coronavirus to get a positive message out there about how to increase your immunity and all that. And, newsjacking is probably one of the most popular ways to increase your SEO, to increase the algorithms showing your stuff is if they want people to keep reading, keep searching, stay on the platforms. So they're going to show things that are the most relevant. So the more that you can just keep your eyes open for anything, it doesn't have to be as big as the coronavirus, but it can be just something that's in the news, especially if there's like Harvard said this, people know what Harvard is. So now it's like you get to use that and they generally trust that. So they'll generally trust you, even if they don't know who you are. So I think that that's such a smart way to go. And I also agree with you that the structure, like having a structure gives you freedom, right? If you have to make it up every single time and think about how you're going to do something or when you're going to do it or why you're going to do it, you are just not going to do it. But when you have a structure that you can follow, that's how I get so much content done for my brand, for my practices, and for our clients, is because there's a structure to it. It's like, you only have to do this part of it. We do the rest. I only have to do this part of it. I'm not going to now go and edit it and post it and do all the things that my team does, because I would never get that done.
Right.
And once I have the structure, then it became much easier. So I love that you have like the 3 segments and you know what you're not going to do.
Well, I appreciate that, Nick. And yeah, and here's the crazy thing when it comes to content creation. Make the content creation work for you. What I mean by that is figure out how to apply that structure into your existing business and operations in your day-to-day life. Because if you're trying to find new time to create that, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
By the way, that's part of the reason you haven't done it thus far, because you can't find the darn time in the calendar. So here's what I would recommend. Find the time. So when Dan and I started our podcast, so we're in season 5. We just released, at the time of our recording, we just released episode 92, right? So we've been doing this for a while. In the beginning, every week, we would try to find an hour, because by the way, our show's 30 minutes, but by the time you do the edits and the production, it usually took an hour. We would find an hour to have a conversation and record it. Then we'd have to quickly edit it and quickly create the show notes and then try to rush it to get it out by the next week when we launched, to only then start the cycle again. Oh my gosh, it was exhausting. Telling about it is exhausting to me, okay? But here's the thing. What we realized is last season, for season 4, we went into a recording studio, professional recording studio, and recorded the entire season across 2 days. Oh my gosh, it was a crazy 2 days. It was insane, but then we were done.
Yep.
If I'm a chiropractor and I'm looking to get started in this, a lot of chiropractors have a commute to the office. What I would do is take out your phone. It comes with a memo recording app, a voice recording app. And on your drive home, I would talk about something. I would say, let's talk about ankle pain.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what normally causes ankle pain. Here's the type of adjustments I do to address ankle pain. Here's why if you don't deal with ankle pain early on, down the road, it can be a major problem. And record that, just your own voice talking about it on your commute home. Take that recording, upload it to something like rev.com, rev.com, have it transcribed, have someone on your team edit it, and you just wrote an article. See, there's such a belief, and we have Hemingway to thank for this, that we need to be drunk and bleed onto the page for quality prose to be created, right? No, in this modern era, take advantage of the technology you have. We could take this hour-long podcast and slice and dice this into hundreds of pieces of content that people would happily consume. Build once, use many. Find ways to build it into your schedule where you're driving home anyway. Instead of listening to the radio once a week, talk into your voice recorder and write an article. It's a lot easier that way.
I mean, after you listen to experience this, then do the voice recording.
There you go.
That's right. You'll be happy to know that there's now a Hemingway app that you can that will help you simplify the language in your writing. So that's
yes, good. Indeed. Yes, indeed.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about the content is, it seems like this book has really like changed your life, I would imagine. Like,
it has.
And it's opened up a lot of opportunities. And I believe you worked with Scribed. Is that right? I did.
Yeah.
So can you talk about like why the book is so important? Like if somebody's out there and is looking to write a book, why writing a book is so important? And just talk for people that don't know what Scribed is, if you could just like explain how that became, how they like helped you get the book out.
Sure. So I think writing a book is a wonderful, painful, gut-wrenching, glorious, amazing experience, okay? Yeah. It is not easy to write a book, okay? But it is easier than you think to write a book. I believe that everybody has a book in them. I don't believe that everybody can get the book out of them by themselves. Okay. Now, as somebody who is a professional speaker, I spend, 3.5 weeks out of every month on the road giving speeches around the world. I actually talked my book. I didn't write it. So we did 12 one-hour interviews. We transcribed that. That produced 240 pages of content. Now, will everybody be able to do that? No. And I don't say it from a place of ego. I say that from a place of, you've been listening to me for an hour. You know I've got a lot to say. You know I talk quickly. I can fit a lot into a short amount of time, especially if I'm only playing against the recorder, right?
Yeah.
If I don't have to wait for the audience to catch up, I can go really fast because we can write it out and we can slow it down when we read it. I worked with Scribe, which is a great organization that helps people write their books. You pay them, they do interviews, they extract the book from you, they put it together in book format, they help you edit it, they help you publish it, and now you have a book in the world. So there's a lot of organizations like Scribe. Scribe was the one that I found that I enjoyed the best. But there's I think there's huge opportunities. So don't let that fear of sitting down and looking at the cursor blinking at you saying, what are you going to write, stop you from writing a book. Here's the thing I would recommend for books. And here's why I think, and I don't say this from a place of ego, but I think it's useful to have context for people's perspective and their opinion. My book came out almost 2 years ago at the time we're recording this. 23 months to be exact. And it sells more copies each month than it did the previous month. I believe there's a very specific reason for that. And the reason for that is I worked really, really hard to write an evergreen book. My goal was to write a book that 30 years from now, I would get on an airplane and see somebody reading my book because it's still relevant. Do I mention social media in my book? Yes. How many paragraphs does it get? Less than 15, right? Because I don't know where social media is going to be in 30 years. It may not even exist. But you know what is going to exist 30 years from now? The phone. You know what's going to exist from now, 30 years from now? In-person meetings, physical meetings, videos. Why? Because these things have existed for over 100 years. And because they've existed so long, I know that they're going to be around for more in the future. Social media, it's still a little new. I'm not anti-social media. I'm just like, it's new. So if you're thinking as a doctor that you want to write a book, two things. Number one, you may want to write a book that has nothing to do with your profession, and that's okay too. But you may be able to put a chiropractic spin on a topic that hasn't had a chiropractic spin on it before. If you're going to write a book specifically for chiropractors, know that it's generally only going to be read by chiropractors. If you're going to write a book specifically for patients, know that not nearly as many are going to read it as you'd like to, because there's a boatload of diet books and health books out there that don't get read by the people that need to read them. So know who your target audience. My target audience, and the reason we titled the book Never Lose a Customer Again, was people who were tired of having their customers, their patients, run out the back door as quickly as they were bringing them in the front door. It's a big enough problem in the world that enough people buy the book and continue to buy the book and read the book going forward. So write an evergreen book, and I think you'll find that it has huge impact on your life and on your business.
Well, roughly 10 of those have been bought by me, because I bought when I found it, I bought it for my whole team in my practice and then in the agency. And we read it together. We created the process. We're still in the process of implementing everything. But like I said, cannot recommend this book enough. I think if every chiropractor did this, read it and actually implemented the ideas that they come up with out of it, I think that our utilization of chiropractic would be much higher. Our PVAs would be much higher. And the more successful chiropractors are in the world, the better the world is. So I think that books like this, even though that it, I know it was, roughly your intention to help more businesses be successful.
Totally.
But I cannot thank you enough for, because it speaks so much to me and what I think the problems in the profession are. And it's just so well written. I think you're a great guy. We've gotten to spend a little bit of time together, and this has just been an awesome experience. So remember, if you want a book, go to joeycoleman.com. That's Joey Coleman, like the what's that?
Camping equipment.
Camping equipment.
Joey like a 5-year-old somewhere, but I'm a little older than 5. Joey Coleman like the camping equipment. Coleman. JoeyColeman.com. The book you can get it on. The best place to get the book, to be frank, go to your local bookstore. Go to Amazon. Go to Audible. If you've enjoyed listening to my voice, you can hear me read the book to you, right? So you can use that commute to work to process the book. Would just love to have people get exposed to the methodology and the method in there. And by the way, just as a general rule out there, in the first chapter, I explained that if you buy the book and you read the book and you don't like the book, you send me an email and I'll refund your money. It's that simple. Like, even though you bought it from Amazon or wherever, it doesn't matter. You send me an email and I'll refund the money. Some people also then go to Amazon and get the refund as 2. And so you get 2 for the price of 1, and I'll have paid you for your time to read the book, that kind of thing. I really believe this can work. There's 46 case studies from industries around the world. And the reason I did a lot of different industries is because you can learn from people other than chiropractors. And frankly, you should learn from people other than chiropractors. Not because chiropractors aren't good at teaching and aren't good at, modeling, but your customers aren't comparing you. Your patients aren't comparing you to other chiropractors. They're comparing you to Netflix and Amazon and Tesla and the most amazing experiences that they've had. That's the bar in 2020 and beyond for creating a remarkable patient experience.
Well, there's a dental, I remember that there's a dental example in there, which is directly related to chiropractic.
Totally, yeah. That's the first example in the book, is a dental example.
And then Garrett Gunderson, who lots of chiropractors know, with Wealth Factory. So that was a good one as well. I think they do such a good job.
They do an amazing job. And there will be, for those of you that are maybe anxious, don't worry. There will be a chiropractor example in the next book, okay? We're already working on it. It's already coming together. We'll get one in the next book for sure.
Very nice. I'm going to throw my hat into the ring. That'll force me to.
I love it. There you go. Perfect.
And then the Experience This podcast, we talked a lot about that, but I just think it's a must listen for people that are looking for great examples of how to increase it. I just think you and your co-host are just so smart and just have such a good way of looking at it. So I'm excited to do our webinar on May 5th at 7 p.m. Central. And remember, go to www.neverloseapatientagain.com. But is there anything else that you think that we didn't? I know we covered a lot, but is there anything else that you want to add to this before we go?
I would say this. First of all, thank you so much for listening. You've devoted over an hour to listen to this episode. I know it's gone longer than the typical episode, so I apologize to Nick for that, because once I get going, as you can tell, folks, I get going.
I wish we had 3 hours.
Here's the thing. I wrote this book to help entrepreneurs, to help companies, to help chiropractors keep more of their patients, their customers, their clients. Something happened that I hoped would happen, but I wasn't sure if it would happen. It allowed business owners, chiropractors, doctors, to reconnect with why they got into practice in the first place. See, lots of times when we start a business, we have these great intentions and we have this vision, and then we get into running a business. I've run businesses for 20 years now. We get into business and we lose sight of what those original things were, because it's hard to run a business. It's really difficult to be an entrepreneur. It's difficult to have your own practice. What I love about the impact that this book has already had on the world is that people who have read it and have reconnected with creating remarkable patient experiences have reconnected with why they got in the business of being a chiropractor in the first place. And to me, that's a really added benefit. So if you're listening and you're struggling, if you're listening and you're thinking, why did I do this? And you're looking at the debt and you're looking at your bills and you're looking at your monthly nut and what you're trying to cover, and you're trying to figure all this stuff out, and you're feeling a little hopeless, you're feeling a little dejected, you're feeling a little beat down, carve out some time for the book. Because I promise you what it will do is it will re-spark something that's already there. I'm not going to give you something new. Okay, there's maybe new ideas, new perspectives. But what I am going to do is I'm going to try to hold a flame under that spark that's gone dark inside of you about why you decided to become a chiropractor in the first place. So I hope you'll give it a chance.
Awesome. If you don't give it a chance after that, I don't know what's going to get you to give it a chance. So, Joey, I so appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to the webinar on.
So am I, folks. Come back and listen to the webinar. We'd love to have you.
So obviously, for the last time, the webinar is on May 5th at 7 p.m. go to www.neverloseapatientagain.com. If anybody has any questions for me or for Joey before the webinar, be sure to reach out, and we'll see you on the next one.